Hi, welcome back. It's Rick Nelson in the booth. So what we're looking at is, this is one of the most difficult quarter glass to pull. This is the Ultima. And it varies model to model on how much urethane's behind it and also the difficulty level. This one was pretty difficult because you have to breach back here, and this is a thick area. So what I recommend is a breach tool. So this is a flat blade knife, fairly thick metal, and what we suggest to do, flat side to the glass, is come in here and breach these pins before you, and this corner before you get started, because then when you start cinching down on the cutting element, it'll add to the how easy it is to get the removal done. Also, if you can get on the inside of the vehicle, the glass is big enough, and come in and pop the back pin as well from the inside, and even the back corner, all those will benefit the operation when working with the QuarterMaster. Alright, welcome back in the booth. I'm going to discuss the path of least resistance, because when we're cutting with the QuarterMaster and most winding tools, that's what we're working for. So in these small quarter lights, I'm using wire here, and by the way, the QuarterMaster works with both wire and string. So you can see your initial breach when you're tensioning here is either going to be this back corner trying to pull through here, or this top corner trying to pull down. Path of least resistance, probably going to pull this corner, cut that first, and then try to breach this large area. Now you can see when you're pulling back here, whether it's string or wire, see this contact point? This string or wire, whichever one you're using, is going to be contacting this whole back corner back here just like that, and trying to breach that. So it's extremely difficult. And this is why we recommend the tension, release, tension, release, tension, release. And what that does, especially when you're using a filament, is it allows that filament under tension when you're holding to start its way down into the adhesive. If you just pull, release, you're going to get this rubber effect of it bending to the stress and not allowing it to cut. So you do have to tension, hold, and using the ratchet or the torque wrench. If you set the correct setting for whatever cutting element you're using, you won't break the wire or the string. You hit the setting on the torque wrench, and then you hold that setting and then release. Pull to the setting, hold, and then release. And you may hold it for 5, 8, 10 seconds, but if you're using filament especially, you have to give that filament time to stress the urethane to begin failing and allow it to start cutting. If you try to force that, you're going to have a pile of spaghetti down by your feet. Now, wire is a different story. As we know, wire cuts, it doesn't tear. String filament tears. So there's the big difference. But again, if we had breached this back corner and breached these pins, you can see right away that the filament or the cutting element would immediately come down and hit this face of the urethane, and that's where it cuts easily. Same thing over here. It'd only have this profile going across that urethane bead and performing very well that way. It's when you're initiating the cut on any of these units that you see this back corners like that, you've got to realize that that cutting element is trying to pull 5 inches of urethane and try to cut through that all at the same time. It doesn't really get enough stress right here to get that path of least resistance there, because all this absorbs that. So be aware of that when you're working on some parts. You're going to have a brutal time on breaching these back corners in these situations, so be aware of it. Try to give yourself the best advantage by breaching these corners and allowing the cutting element to cut down across these faces here, and then it'll have a sharper cutting angle down here to begin to go ahead and finish and make that cut. Alright, welcome back in the booth. What I've set up here is to show you a couple of different things. Number one, excuse me, if you're going to use a double cutting setup, whereas you're winding both sides at the same time, I recommend square knots, main square knot, and then a square knot in each tail. When that tension's up, it'll draw down. Also, I wanted to reiterate what you're up against if you're using filament on some of these parts. Again, this is the Ultima. Spit. Curse. You can see what a broad section of urethane it's trying to breach back here with a filament. So, and I'll also point out that a lot of this material wants to readily peel off the panel. So when you're trying to cut it, this is trying to roll up, so it doesn't really cut that easily until you get up to a breach point. Now this breached off the body pretty easy. You can see by the way the urethane released. It virtually didn't cut it out. It stressed it until it just released off the body. But again, that's the situation there. You can use a double cutting setup with both string and wire. Both of them are pretty effective depending on the part you're cutting on. But again, just be aware of these loads back here in these corners. Look at the part you're trying to cut out. Try to figure out where the string or the filament's going to try to cut first. If you have an advantage you can make by breaching corners with a knife or a blade. You don't really have to cut this whole face, but if you want to, obviously this is the hardest part, so when you cut this forward angled urethane bead, it'll hinge on this part. So as you go down, it comes up to that point. So another thing I'll bring up while we're talking about that, as this does tension, and I'll just fake the situation up here a little bit. The string advances down the face of the part, obviously, and then obviously this blade here in most cases is at the same height as the glass part, pretty much by design. So as the string starts to come up, you do want to stuff one of the tuck sheets between the molding and the body on that leading edge and let these tension down against that and ride over. They're self-lubricating. So that's the ticket with the tuck sheets. Once you get your stuff started and this string starts to progress across the face of these the molding part, you want to have tuck sheets in place so the string's riding over the tuck string and not over the molding there, or the tuck sheet, not over the molding. And you get a nice even cut that way. Also be aware when you're winding in a double cut situation, one side's going to be winding to the outside of the spool, which is ideal where we want it to be. The other one's winding to the inside of the spool. So you have to be aware that you're not getting any loads down here on this side like that. Once you get to a point like that where the string has cut and progressed down to where it's coming in on both sides of the plate, it's best at this point. Couple things you can do. You can continue to draw that and let the string rub here a little bit because it won't be too much of a pressure point. Or you can just take the tool off, tilt the part out, and reach in here with a razor knife and finish that cut. But that's that setup. Hi, Rick Nelson back in the booth. Hey, I'll close out this video with a nice little tool I came across and an idea I thought of. For all you guys using any kind of a bladed tool, or even, I mean this applies to any metal tool that we use in the industry. What you got this for is basically you can clip the alligator clip to your whatever tool you're using. And then this needs to have an alligator clip added to it or whatever, but you hang that off of the door jamb strike. And while you're using the tool, if you happen to hit the body of the car, this will light up. So if you're using a long knife, rammer jammers, any of those type tools, this will give you an indicator while you're underneath there and you can't see anything, whether or not you got a strike. This is from I believe it's Fruit Ridge Tools. I'll put a link to it in the video. It's $2.99, can't go wrong. But nice little safety feature if you're out there working on a vehicle and you want to ensure that you're not sneaking something underneath the glass that you don't know about, that'll help you out. So cheers on that tip.